시청자 여러분 안녕하세요.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings. This is PROSTHODONTICS on Friday Live, which addresses different steps of implant treatment as well as its side effects. Today, we have with us Dr. Hiossen of Obok Manse Dental Clinic. He's going to talk under the topic, the latest trends of one-day zirconia restoration. Greetings. I'm sure you're very busy with treating patients and doing association-related business. These days, digital dentistry is gaining a lot of popularity, and there is more demand for digital prosthodontic restorations. I'm sure a lot of dentists will be interested in today's topic. Could you briefly summarize your lecture before we dive in? Today, I'm going to talk about latest trends of one-day zirconia restorations. Already, many dentists are providing zirconia prosthodontic restorations to patients. When you deliver zirconia prosthesis, I think this thought may have come across your mind. What would it be like if I were to provide one-day zirconia restorations to the patients? Wouldn't it increase satisfaction both for the dentist and the patient? My topic is around this thought exactly. I look forward to your lecture. Those of you watching from dental site, you can participate real time via the chat to leave your questions and have them answered. Through a lucky draw, you'll be able to win Starbucks coffee coupons. Those of you who have been chosen as best questions will receive 3 Starbucks coffee coupons, learn about digital dentistry, and get your Americano coffee coupons. I look forward to your keen interest, and let us begin Dr. Hiossen's lecture. Today, I'm going to talk about latest trends of one-day zirconia restorations. First, I'm going to talk about zirconia. When you think of one-day zirconia restoration, many people would wonder how fast it could be sintered because it takes a long sintering time in general. As you do one-day zirconia restorations, you come to realize that material is everything. I'm going to talk about how materials of zirconia have developed. As you think about reducing time for fabrication, you can additionally reduce time with milling. I'm going to talk about how milling time can be reduced, and finally, I'm going to talk about the clinical factors of one-day zirconia restoration. So first, I'm going to talk about zirconia for dentistry. When I was studying in college, flexure strength was looked at when classifying ceramic. Now, flexure strength and flexure toughness are considered together to classify ceramic. As for 4-unit zirconia, it's classified as class 5. Flexure strength is 800 megapascal and flexure toughness is over 5. The zirconia that we use is class 4 and class 5. Zirconia can be divided into monoclinic, tetragonal, and cubic phase. Monoclinic is very soft like a chalk. We fabricate using this. In tetragonal phase, it becomes very hard. Once it progresses to the cubic phase, translucency increases and you get aesthetic results. The zirconia for dentistry is sintered. Through sintering process, it advances to cubic phase and the molecule increases. The zirconia molecule size changes depending on temperature and time. Through these series of changes, the zirconia's optical properties as well as translucency are improved. 1,500 degrees in which zirconia is sintered is quite high. Sintering process occurs in this temperature. Through temperature and time, the molecule grows, and it also affects how the color is expressed. For one-day zirconia restoration, we need to reduce sintering time. Many people ask me this question: you sinter zirconia? If you have processed the zirconia yourself, you would know that through sintering process, the chalky zirconia would become hard. In order to fabricate one-day zirconia restoration 11 years ago in 2011, Zirconia came up with the idea to rapidly sinter zirconia within 90 minutes. If you take a look, this is Zirconia in-fire HTC speed furnace. You can see that it goes up by 1,500 degrees, and as the tray goes down, the temperature goes down to 1,300 degrees. You put in the zirconia, and then as it goes up, it is heated to 1,500 degrees once again, and rapid zirconia sintering was attempted in this way. If you use it clinically, at times this led to zirconia fracture, and at times it didn't, so there were a lot of uncertainty. Therefore, it was not widely adopted. However, I was inspired by this idea. At the time, I only had this average furnace. About 6 years ago, in 2016, I used a normal furnace to do rapid zirconia sintering. You can see that the furnace is opened at 1,500 degrees. I put in the zirconia at 1,300 degrees. And then I pull it out. This is a dangerous process. You should not try this at your dental clinic. At the time, based on my passion and effort, I was able to succeed in zirconia sintering within 19 minutes. It takes over an hour for the furnace to go up to 1,500 degrees. In order to reduce such time, what should we do? In the beginning, the resistance value of hot wire was not significant. Therefore, I was able to increase the temperature increase per minute very significantly. You can see that the temperature increase per minute is over 200 degrees. The limit is at 1,200 degrees, and then I thought I needed to think back. Rather than providing bigger electricity to generate the heat, I've realized that if I reduce the hot wire temperature to 1,200 degrees before applying electricity, faster temperature increase per minute could be achieved. Using this method, I was able to reach 1,500 degrees within 20 minutes, and I was able to get a patent. This shows that rapid sintering is possible using just average furnace. Because it takes a lot of time to sinter, I came to think long and hard. What if you sinter zirconia first and then grind crown out of it? Glidewell of USA in 2015 released Roxor Now. I'm sure you have prepped the zirconia crown. In my dental clinic, you would have to use 2 or 3 very rough diamond burr to prep it. Fabrication is possible, and fabrication within 40 minutes is possible. I've never used this product, but in order to fabricate this zirconia crown, I think a significant use of burr may be required. About 6 years ago, 2016, Dentsply Sirona released a Cerac Speed Fire Furnace where rapid sintering within 40 minutes was possible. Since 6 years ago, one-day zirconia sintering was possible. It was used clinically. In this system, this is a closed system, and Cerac system was required. 5 years ago, in 2017, Evoclar CS4, where quick sintering is possible, was released. CS6 was released last year. More Korean dentists than thought to use CS6, therefore they use quick sintering in their daily practice. Last year, a lot of new products were released. From Amman Gilbal, Ceramil Derm DRS furnace was released. Unique thing about this furnace is that unlike other furnaces, the door opens front and back rather than top and down. Therefore, the space efficiency is improved. There are many questions about rapid sintering. The first question is whether the strength goes down if quick sintering is done. This was something I was curious about as well, so I used a universal machine to measure the strength of zirconia. US International Razor W 1182 material was used. I followed ISO regulation to come up with a specimen, and flexure strength was measured. Upon 10 minutes sintering, 911 megapascal, and 19 minute sintering, 957 megapascal. In 21 minutes, 1071 megapascal was measured. However, it's difficult to measure yourself. For your information, when you sinter zirconia, if it shows a certain level of translucency, it means that zirconia has reached a certain density, therefore it has sufficient strength. There's another change in the past. In order to sinter zirconia, molybdenum disilicide heating element was used in sintering furnace. The reason is, as for the 3 mole partially stabilized yttria zirconia, it required over 1,500 degrees of temperature. In order to achieve this, molybdenum disilicide heating element was required to maintain such high heat. But 4 mole or 5 mole yttria partially stabilized zirconia, in most cases, the sintering temperature is 1,400 to 1,500 degrees. Therefore, silicon carbide heating elements can be used. These days, we use silicon carbide heating elements, and in the past, we used to use molybdenum disilicide heating elements. I'm going to talk about the development of zirconia materials. Professor Thomas Eager of MIT has said that with the spread of new materials, there can be 2.5% of annual cost reduction, 3.5 to 7% of increased productivity, and the 50% of less workforce required, and significant improvement in performance and working conditions. In the case of a 3 mole yttria stabilized zirconia, it had high strength of 1,300 megapascal, but it showed low translucency, and in order to provide color, coloring process was required. As you can see in the screen, the zirconia is white. After brushing and adding color, this is after sintering and polishing. In order to fabricate zirconia crown, coloring liquid needed to be applied. It took me a lot of time to be able to do a good job using this. At the time, dentists and lab technicians prided themselves actually in how much they've spent on fabricating zirconia, for instance, 5 million won or 10 million won. But this is a thing of the past. These days, coloring is not necessary. After milling, you can fabricate it, and you can still get very aesthetic zirconia prosthesis. Currently, with the development of material, you do not need to do zirconia coloring. There's polychromatic or multi-layered zirconia available. Even beginners can get aesthetic zirconia prosthesis. As multi-layered zirconia became applied into clinical practice, even those who have just started CAD/CAM practice can fabricate the prosthesis very easily. There are things to consider in terms of strength and clinical application. In the past, we used a 3 mole yttria zirconia. It had very high strength of 1200 to 1300 megapascal. This is because of transformal toughening. The mechanism that inhibits cracks only exists in 1200 to 1300 megapascal zirconia. It's very hard. It can be used for posterior implant prosthesis or custom zirconia abutment. You can use 3 mol yttria zirconia with 1200 or 1300 megapascal. 800 to 1100 megapascal zirconia. This is called as cubic zirconia. It's very translucent and easy to express colors. Therefore, it is widely used in dental labs and dental clinics. The 600 megapascal zirconia. This is used for anterior full zirconia prosthesis. It's very translucent, however, as shown. This is an image where diamond was used to crack the ceramic to measure the strength and to observe how the crack progresses. You can see that in 600 megapascal, the crack has fully progressed. The transformal toughening does not exist in cubic zirconia, and therefore, it can be fractured and the strength is not really strong. Toso zirconia powder is used frequently for fabrication. In the case of 1200 megapascal zirconia, Z-Pex is used for 800 to 1100 megapascal zirconia. Z-Pex Smile and Z-Pex 4 are used. Doctor, may I ask a question? Sure. There's a zirconia disc from Ostem implant. There are different types depending on strength, and there are multi-layer discs. Do you have experience using it? Unfortunately, I've yet to use the zirconia disc from Ostem, but I've looked at the catalog. Ostem also used the Toso's powder 100% in fabricating zirconia, and I'm sure it's going to show good results. Along with the fact that Ostem uses Z-Pex, Z-Pex 4, and Z-Pex Smile powder, it is Ostem who's making the zirconia disc, so I'm sure it's of great quality. Yes, we're trying really hard. If an opportunity arises, I would love to get your feedback. So we're going to entertain some questions. There are many questions here. Let's take a look at the chat screen. We're going to answer some questions before carrying on with your lecture. Sure. Smile again. Cheer up, Prosthodontics on Friday. Good doctor, Professor Toino, Dr. Isuyoung. Greetings. I love the live Prosthodontics on Friday. Thank you for words of encouragement. Let's look at the question from Podolji. Considering the adaptation with natural tooth and mechanical property, as well as physical property, what advantage does zirconia have over gold? Advantage of zirconia. There is almost none or close to none wear on antagonist. If the antagonist is natural tooth, in the case of other materials, it causes wear on natural tooth. However, uniquely, zirconia does not cause any wear on antagonist, and this is a huge plus. Gold has many advantages as well. If the percentage of gold is very high, it is almost as if the occlusion is automatically adjusted and the patient can easily adjust to it. This is a major advantage as well. I'm not sure whether it's appropriate, but if you use gold, the financial burden may increase compared with zirconia prosthesis. Will there be such issues? Well, these days, the price of gold is so steep, it may be difficult to choose gold. ID Yongyong, is there a block that you recommend for anterior zirconia prosthesis? It varies depending on different manufacturers. In most cases, Toso powder is used for the blocks. If you use a zirconia of 600 megapascal, in most cases, G-Pex Smile of Toso is used or similar powder or components are used. I think you should use zirconia that is recommended for use of anterior prosthesis to provide aesthetic restorations. In live program, it's difficult to mention certain product name. If you're really curious, perhaps you could reach out to Dr. Lee personally. I hope you understand we cannot name names. Yaira, the cost of zirconia restorations vary depending on dental clinics. So which product or brand should I choose? Is there a special criteria? I'm not sure whether this person is a dentist. The price varies by dental clinics. I think this is a difficult question to answer. Next, Autumn. What kind of cementation do you use? RMGI and resin cement. Is there a difference between the two? Question about cementation. RMGI cement, resin cement, there's a little difference. It depends on your preference. I use a resin cement containing MDP monomer. That is my preference. MDP monomer is very strong and it can lead to chemical integration. Therefore, I prefer resin cement containing MDP monomer. You can use RMGI as well. Thank you. It's really easy to understand because you have video clips included in your presentation. This comment was raised by Kirini, ID Shushu. How much budget do you require in order to get a one-day zirconia restoration system? Can you give a rough estimate? Milling machine, furnace. You need to be equipped with it. Oral scanner and 5-axis milling machine, rapid sintering furnace. These are basic equipment that you require for one-day zirconia restoration. You also need to have tools related to polishing. If you're really curious, you should reach out to Dr. Lee Soo-young personally. I'm sure Dr. Lee will provide insight into it. Lee 74 Nen. What kind of cement should I use for temporary bonding zirconia prosthesis? Do you do a lot of temporary bonding? What kind of temporary cement do you use to bond the temporary prosthesis? In the case of simple prosthesis, I do not provide provisional, I just provide final prosthesis. I use oral scanner. The contact is quite precise, so I don't really feel stressed. In most cases, I just deliver final prosthesis. The only exception is full mouth case. In this case, I use provisional to check occlusion. In the case of TMJ patient, or if they're very sensitive, I would check their occlusion once more before delivering final prosthesis. Is there a temporary cement that you recommend? If the design for temporary and final prosthesis of zirconia restoration is the same, then it can be fabricated in the same way. Without getting stressed, I just deliver final prosthesis. I rarely do temporary bonding of zirconia restoration at my dental clinic. Understood? Violet Mint, in terms of cost of rapid sintering, how much cost saving is possible, and is there any difference in longevity? In terms of cost, actually, by cost, it's not finance. You can save time. This is a major plus. Because you can deliver in a very quick manner, you can save cost. In terms of longevity, as mentioned, I've been doing rapid sintering since 2016. Just because it has gone through rapid sintering, it does not mean more fracture of zirconia crown. This is because basic strength is ensured, and I do not think there is any difference in terms of longevity. Shuttle hole. With time, zirconia technology is advancing. What is the newly emerged side effect, and how can I prevent it? With the advances in technologies, I think the side effects will be reduced. As more clinicians have more experience, information are shared as to how side effects can be resolved, and because of such accomplishment, no major side effects have surfaced. In the past, we used a 3-mole yttria zirconia. It was quite hard and there were much less fracture, but when there was an issue, it was very difficult to remove it. In the case of 4-mole or 5-mole yttria zirconia, the frequency of fracture has increased, but you can remove it more easily. It is a double-edged sword. Zirconia is known to cause harm to the antagonist because it's so strong, and some people prefer PFM for implant crown. Is this improved in 3rd generation zirconia? Causing wear on antagonist because it's too hard. I think it's because of premature contact. Some patients are more sensitive, and therefore, in the case of zirconia restoration, you need to remove a premature contact for sure to reduce patient discomfort. I think that is most important. Those who prefer PFM for implant crown, if the antagonist is natural tooth, the PFM can cause natural tooth wear. The patient will be able to adapt more easily because of such wear, and it could be part of their strategy. Personally, I believe zirconia causes much less wear on antagonist, therefore I prefer zirconia restorations. At times, people say that PFM is insured, but zirconia is not insured, and that's why a lot of people use PFM. I think this is a valid reason, yes. Good society. In the case of same-day zirconia restoration, is there any difference in terms of biocompatibility with existing zirconia? Are there any known side effects? Zirconia. Once it reaches a certain density with sintering, then it does not show major difference. As mentioned, the commercialized 1-day zirconia has been with us for over 11 years, and a lot of research has been conducted. There has not been any special differences, so therefore you can use it in your clinical practice without worrying too much. Lee 74 Nen. In adopting milling machine, depending on the level of wear of milling burr within milling machine, the precision of milled crown may differ. In order to maintain certain consistency in terms of quality, is there a guideline? Is there a tip as to check whether there has been wear on the milling burr? Thank you for the wonderful lecture. If precise fabrication is required, you need to measure the burr by taking images and comparing the level of wear. However, in dentistry, it does not require such inspection. The easiest way to do it is to replace burr after milling 100 crowns. You need to define the number of fabricated prosthesis. I think this is the easiest way, 100 crowns. In the past, 3-mole yttria zirconia was quite hard and you had to replace burr quite frequently, but in the case of cubic zirconia, the physical property is much softer, so you'd be able to fabricate more restorations compared with 3-mole yttria. Shu. We'll entertain up to Shu's question and then answer the rest after Dr. Lee's lecture. You said 600 megapascal. The strength is low, but is it so much so as PFM chipping? Chipping does not occur in zirconia. Fracture occurs, so failure tendency is different. The PFM has metal coping, so it does not have fracture, but in the case of zirconia, fracture occurs. If it is 600 megapascal, if you compare with a PFM, what's it like? In the anterior area, you can use it, but I think it's quite dangerous to use it in the posterior area. There are many more questions, but because we need to entertain Dr. Lee's lecture, We'll answer them later. Thank you for leaving so many comments and questions. I look forward to your participation and your questions as Dr. Lee continues on with his lecture. As mentioned, among those who leave their questions, lucky draw will be done to send coffee coupons. Please carry on. Now let's move on to milling and reducing time for milling. A lot of time has already been saved. Sintering time has been saved. We can reduce time in terms of milling as well. The zirconia fabrication method that I used first was a wet zirconia grinding. Diamond burr was used for fabrication in 2014. Carbide burr milling was introduced. About 10 years ago, I used a CEREC OmniCan and a CEREC MCS milling machine was used to provide prosthesis. Carbide milling was introduced in 2014. At the time, I thought this was awesome, but looking back, it has a lot of room for improvement. The sprue size is quite significant and the level of fabrication is not really good. About 8 years ago, the level we achieved was like that, and in 2020, I adopted CEREC Prime Mill. Carbide milling has significantly improved. As you can see, it's not just milled on one side, but parallel milling is now possible. On both sides, burrs are milling. Of course, this will lead to reduced milling time. Parallel milling is only possible with a densely known as prime mill. If you fabricate prosthesis like this, milling time can be significantly reduced. In the past, milling crown took about 10 minutes. However, if you do parallel milling, the milling time is reduced to 4 minutes or 6 minutes. And precision has improved drastically. What is interesting is that if time is reduced, precision also goes down, but precision has gone up. In the case of MCXL milling machine, you can see grooves not being formed appropriately when milled 8 minutes 30 seconds, but in prime mill, even though it has been milled for 5 minutes, the groove has become much clearer. A lot of people think that the design file from 3Shape or ExoCAD cannot be milled in prime mill. However, it is possible. CAM software can be used to fabricate the prosthesis STL file designed in 3Shape CAD on MCXL, Prime Mill, and MCX5. In this way, 3Shape or ExoCAD design file can be fabricated. Milling has been upgraded, and on Prime Mill, you can fabricate a screw hole on a occlusal table. This is a favorite photo of mine when developing milling machine. You may think that mechanics is most important, but if you take a closer look, there are most number of people in CAM software development team. In fabricating prosthesis, the mechanics is important, but CAM software is especially important. 10 years ago, I used a CEREC, and I talked about why CEREC's closed system allows for modelless prosthesis. The conclusion that I came to was that CEREC's CAD system considers the CAD design. We need to be able to fabricate what has been designed using CAD program. There needs to be a CAD design that reflects the tools and fabrication method for it to be supported by CAM. This is grounds for modelless prosthesis. I presented this in 2018 at Korea Academy of Prosthodontics with Dr. Kim Hee-chul, but it was not widely known then, so I'm trying to make this more widely known through seminars. Next, I'm going to talk about the clinical aspect of one-day zirconia restoration. One-day zirconia that can be applied to dental clinical practice is zirconia inlay, onlay, post, custom abutment, crown, and zirconia bridges that are under 3 units. This patient has come from afar. This patient is actually a spouse of my patient, so he traveled far to come to my dental clinic, and rapid treatment was required. With improvement of oral scanner, you do not need to take images. You can record patient condition using oral scanner. If you look at the patient condition, after having observed the patient condition, I designed the zirconia post. In fabricating zirconia post, there are challenges in using oral scanner. The biggest issue is that the depth of oral scanner is not significant, therefore the deep inner surface of post could not be scanned. In general, as shown, you need to take impression of the post. The post needs to be scanned, the mesh needs to be reversed, and post and core needs to be designed and milled. That is the general way to do it. In order to do this, impression taking of the post was required. Dentsply Sirona introduced Prime Scan. This offers dynamic depth scan function. It can measure up to 20 millimeter. With dynamic depth scan, it is now possible to scan implant scan body and class 2 indirect restoration inlay, the periodontic prosthesis with long teeth, zirconia post for the interior teeth, and others in a very easy manner. Prime scan was used for scanning, and this tooth is quite short. If you look at the scan, the patient has come from long distance. It would have been better if provisional was used, but treatment needed to be done in a quick manner. Therefore, gingivectomy was done and anterior prosthesis was fabricated in a traditional manner. Zirconia is a very aesthetic prosthesis, and this can be fabricated. However, it has a fatal downside. It is fluorescence. This is not widely known in Korea, but about 2-3 years ago in overseas, there are many images that are coming up on the internet that show dark teeth. Even though this person is very beautiful, if she goes to club, her teeth looks black. When people go to clubs, natural teeth should glow, but the prosthesis are shown dark. I think more and more people are aware of this issue after implanted treatment. This person is saying that when this person went to the club, teeth looked dark. This is excessive fluorescence due to treatment. I think the patient received laminate treatment. Therefore, for younger generation or who frequent clubs, I think you need to do build-up method for anterior prosthesis. When you do build-up in porcelain powder, there is fluorescent material, therefore natural fluorescence can be provided. However, for older patients or those who say they will never ever go to club, then we can provide full zirconia anterior prosthesis, which is really strong and which does not fracture. The patient came from long distances, so fabrication was done in a quick manner. You can still see red in gingiva, and this is the one-day zirconia porcelain core, and on the exterior surface, a porcelain build-up prosthesis was provided. Post and core, they were made of zirconia. In the past, making zirconia post was difficult because we used a 5-axis milling machine, Roland DWX51D. It took 45 minutes. It was a huge stress because it took too much time, but by adopting CEREC Prime Mill, In super fast mode, I can fabricate post-core in 3 minutes 16 seconds. In general mode, it's 4 minutes and 50 seconds. In CEREC Speedfire, zirconia post and core can be sintered in 29 minutes. Within 35 minutes, zirconia post was fabricated. In doing one-day zirconia restoration, it is very important to reduce milling time. Now I'm going to talk about what kind of zirconia can go through speed sintering. Using 5-axis milling machine, can use Razor 1100 and CEREC Mandrel, you can use a Zirquick. Milling is very important in 5-axis milling machine. It will take 15-25 minutes, but in parallel milling machine, this would be reduced to 4 to 6 minutes. To summarize, for one-day zirconia restoration, sintering is very important. Now there are products available out there that allow for 20-minute sintering. Next, I've mentioned about the zirconia material. There are not that many zirconia materials that are aesthetic and that can go through speed sintering, but now it's going to be released soon by many companies. If you can reduce the time for milling single crown to within 5 minutes, you can provide one-day zirconia crown within 30 minutes. In my dental clinic, when the patient goes through endodontic treatment, before doing endo treatment, I scan the natural tooth. The reason is after endo treatment, you need to provide post-crown restoration. If you can mimic the original tooth form, that'll be best. In cases this is not possible, the form may be weird or it can be tilted or fractured. In this case, you need to design the crown, but in general, I try to mimic the natural tooth contour. If this is not feasible, I use AI to come up with a CAD design within 5 minutes. Doing CAD design quickly is also very important in providing one-day zirconia restoration. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. In Ostem Implant, we have a digital dental technician contest for lab technicians. From October 10th to November 6th for 4 weeks, this contest is being held in dental site. Come in and look at the presentations of the participants and choose the best digital lab technician yourself. Those of you participating in the vote, there will be a lucky draw and 1,000 coffee coupons will be sent out for 4 weeks. I look forward to your keen interest. There will be the main round for Digital Dental Technician Contest in November 19th, 2022. The total winning is 200 million won, and this is a project to uncover the best digital lab technician in Korea. I look forward to your avid interest. Dr. Lee Seung, we have a lot of questions. If you look at the real-time chat screen, let's look at the questions that await your answers. We have answered up to Shu's question. Next, from Good Dentist. In the case of zirconia, how do you do the bite shoulder or contact shoulder? Do you add porcelain like PFZ? Yes, that is correct. Basically, after you sinter zirconia, you can either do polishing or glazing. In the case of glazing, you can do it very thinly or you can add thickness. You can add contact using glazing. You can add contact. Shu, I heard that if you use zirconia, antagonist wear can be very severe, but you're saying that it's otherwise. Okay, 소문. Based on my understanding, the longevity of zirconia is 5 to 7 years. So what is the longevity like if you use quick sintering in the case of overseas? Is a one-day zirconia restoration widely used? I'm not really sure about longevity of zirconia restoration. If I think about my dental clinic, if people have a very strong occlusion, they can crack zirconia, but if they do not have any premature contact, there have not been major problems. I think the longevity is similar. 10 years in general. In the case of overseas, whether one-day zirconia restorations are widely used, I think it may differ from country to country. If the country has a good lab system and if labs are actively utilized, in those cases, prostheses are fabricated in labs, but in cases where there's difficulty in communicating with labs, the dental clinics fabricate their own prostheses. Okay. Beautiful life. Is there any precautions or considerations we need to make in order to prevent the zirconia fracture? The first thing to consider is the thickness. Basically, you need to have up to 2 millimeters. If you need to provide over 2 millimeters of zirconia thickness, in order to do this, a sufficient prep is required. Otherwise, if you make the crown too thin, fracture is bound to happen. Therefore, in the occlusal surface, a sufficient thickness is the most important thing. Next, you need to remove occlusal interference. You need to remove a premature contact. Kim's zirconia has a very strong strength compared with the existing prosthesis. Even if it is fabricated more thinly, will the strength be okay? At times, occlusal clearance is insufficient. That's why I'm asking. When zirconia was first introduced, people called it white metal. People said it was a ceramic, but it's as strong as metal. But even that white metal fracture, getting sufficient occlusal clearance is most important, especially in number 7, most distal tooth. At times, people experience lack of occlusal clearance. You need to check as much as possible. When you use oral scanner, when you do bite scan, you can immediately know whether occlusal clearance is insufficient. In my case, my staff always call me if there's lack of occlusal clearance and have me do more adjustment. If the clinical crown length is short, do you give groove? No. In CAD/CAM fabrication, it can be more unfavorable because of the adaptability. In that case, I make it some gingival. Today, I have a question. When I restore zirconia in the upper and lower, at times patients complain of weird noise. Is there any way to solve this issue? The weird noise, I've experienced that as well. This is due to 2 reasons. First is occlusal interference. Second is excessive occlusal force and VD is low. In the case where you cannot treat full mouth, I experience these kind of problems. If you can do full mouth rehabilitation and increase VD, the sound can be minimized. But if you only treat the partial arch, and if the patient has a very strong occlusal force, also if there is interference, there can be weird noises coming. As for occlusal interference, we can adjust it, and if the VD is limited, perhaps the patient should get Botox. That's a very good option. Thank you. Next is Rolly. In the case of single natural tooth, it rarely fractures, but in the case of single implant, at times it does fracture. I think this is in relation to zirconia restoration. What is the difference between the fracture frequency of the 2 restorations and how can I prevent it? I'm not really sure. This is my personal opinion. Basically, in natural tooth, there's natural intrusion. Because of periodontal ligament, a significant intrusion can occur. If the same occlusal force is applied, natural teeth can be okay, but implant crown can react more sensitively. In that case, when we do occlusal adjustment, shall we make it slightly underbite so that trim stop can slide if there's resistance? such occlusal adjustment. What do you think about that? That's a very good idea. If the antagonist is implant, you can have a period where the patient adapts to it, then the problem can be solved. The fluorescence issue, beautiful life. When I adjust the occlusion of zirconia restoration in the posterior area, if I use diamond burr, depending on the amount, it can perhaps affect the strength of zirconia. Depending on crown margin contour, is there any potential relation with a fracture of zirconia? I've heard that at times it doesn't matter. In the case of diamond burr, it does not really matter about using burr. I think polishing is more important. You need to do occlusal adjustment without generating heat. Do you need to do irrigation? Yes, you need to do it in order to reduce the temperature. You need to do occlusal adjustment upon irrigation depending on the adjustment amount. If there's no crack upon adjustment, then if it will not affect the strength, but reducing the height itself means that the thickness is reduced. As a result, it will affect the zirconia's strength. There's a question about margin contour. Margin contour. That's the field that I'm not really sure. Depending on a thin edge, knife edge, or shoulder. Personally, I believe the height of occlusal table is most important. I don't experience issues with margin. At times, there can be cementation issue, but otherwise, there's no major issue. TS. Diagnosis of forming abutment, taking impression, and bonding. These are the 4 stages of all ceramic restoration. Which stage is most important? I believe all 4 stages are important. Unless you do a good job in all 4 stages, you will not be able to provide a restoration that lasts long. I believe the diagnosis is very important. You need to determine the thickness of ceramic, and reflecting that you need to form the abutment and take impression and then do bonding, then there will be no major issues. All is well. In the case of zirconia post or inlay, how do you do bonding? In the case of porcelain, you use hydrofluoric acid or silane. Do you do any special surface treatment for zirconia to increase bonding? There are zirconia adhesives. Most adhesives contain MDP monomer. Chemical bonding can be achieved. In the case of zirconia inlay, you cannot expect chemical bonding. You need to maintain retention form for sure to get to good clinical results. The inner surface. Doing sandblasting helps. Lee 74 Nen, I've seen it in a different lecture. In the case of endo crown, by making a deep O cavity, almost like a post, it can help in overcoming short crown. Have you provided similar solution in your case? Fortunately, I've looked at a JPD 2022 study. It reviewed how to restore a tooth that has gone through endo treatment. In this study, after endodontic treatment, cough chamber area is fully removed and a crown that includes that area is called endo crown. The reviewers said that this kind of treatment is credible, but in my dental clinic, I do not do a lot of endo crowns, so I've not seen such cases. What about fracture? If it is concave like this, I have my doubts because Koreans have very strong occlusal force, so I have my reservations. Next, red cherry 1. If you give some margin for zirconia crown, how does it affect the biologic width of gingiva? How much impact will it have on biological width? Based on my limited knowledge, biological width is determined determined between the distance with the margin and alveolar bone. If it is too short because it infringes upon biologic width, inflammation can occur, but fortunately, zirconia is very biocompatible material, and therefore, if you have not invaded biologic width significantly, it will not lead to major problems. When you provide crown, we do not normally infringe upon biologic width. Joe, when you do anterior area buildup, how do you do it modulus? If you have done buildup, you would experience a shrinkage with buildup. As it goes through sintering process, the porcelain powder shrinks, and the amount of shrinkage is not consistent. As a result, if you do buildup, you need model. You need to use model for doing buildup. Infatuated with prosthodontics on Friday. I love the lecture today. Way to go. I believe this concludes the questions and comments for today. Thank you for your wonderful answer. Thank you. Thank you everyone for participating in the chat. Now we will choose the best question among those that have been raised during the Prosthodontics on Friday program. The person chosen as the best question will receive 3 Starbucks coffee coupons, and Dr. Lee Soo-young will make his pick. I would like to make the first question the best question about zirconia and gold. About zirconia and gold. Almost towards the very first. 버들치? Dr. Lee Soo-young has chosen ID 버들치. Congratulations. The coffee coupon will be sent on Monday. Don't feel too let down for not being picked. The chat event continues on. I look forward to your avid interest and participation. Dr. Lee Soo-young, could you give a word of advice to your peers who are studying really hard, watching Prosthodontics on Friday, and listening to you speak about one-day zirconia restoration? Doing one-day zirconia restoration is quite fun if you actually do it. In the past, you had to wait long, but now one-day zirconia restoration is possible. You can provide crown to those who have to travel overseas the next day. One-day zirconia restorations were available in the past, but actually people were not able to access it because there were no appropriate zirconia materials and there was no sintering furnace that was fit for the job. If you have these materials readily available, you'll be able to provide one-day zirconia restoration within 1 hour, and if you make more investment, you can reduce that time to 30 minutes. I recommend you dive into the world of one-day zirconia restorations. People getting off from airplane and coming to dental clinic and going back to the airport within 1 or 2 hours of treatment, I think those days will dawn upon us. It's already possible, but I believe more dental clinics will be able to do that. Thank you for coming here despite your busy schedule. Thank you. Dear viewers of Prosthodontics on Friday, did you enjoy the lecture with Dr. Lee Soo-young? We were able to gain insight into the latest trends of one-day zirconia restorations and get meaningful clinical tips. The questions that were not answered today will be addressed via reply. In the next lecture, we're going to have Dr. Cho Young-jin of Seoul Deep Rooted Dental Clinic speak under the title, I'll Find the Right Implant for You, Ask Whatever. When patient comes in with an implant, at times we cannot discern what kind of implant the patient has. In the next lecture, these situations will be addressed. Thank you for being with us until late. Thank you so much.